Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Why was the ancient world so secretive? Have you ever wondered what ancient civilizations were trying to protect? Throughout history, people have used codes and ciphers to protect their secrets. So join me today as we uncover the hidden messages and codes found in ancient places and try to figure out what they mean. Maybe you can help crack the code.
Spells in the Chamber of Serpents.
A tomb in Cairo has just turned out to be the creepiest place in the world. Historians entered the Chamber of the Serpents only to find a curse waiting for them within, and upon the walls protective spells to keep them out.
The person who was buried in the tomb had an obsession with snakes. They were so crazy for serpents that archaeologists were left speechless by the volume of text describing snakes inside his burial chamber.
Let me back things up a bit here. I should introduce you first to the owner of the burial chamber. His name was Zehutiemhat, a royal scribe who lived 2,500 years ago.
Zehutiemhat died at a very young age, likely in his early 20s. His cause of death was osteoporosis. He had a great job, but his body betrayed him, and he was a ghost before 30. When archaeologists entered the young scribe's tomb, they found its walls covered with ritual verses, almost entirely relating to serpents. The verses come from a book called the Pyramid Texts. Think of it like a Christian being buried in a tomb and having their favorite pieces of scripture from the Bible etched on the walls. This is the case with Zehutiemhat's tomb, only the scripture is all snake-related. The texts talk about the danger of snakes while asking them to please not bite him, and asking the serpents to protect him in the afterlife. These are snake spells. They were definitely a personal choice of the tomb's owner.
The director of archaeological research at the site, Miroslav Barta, said there has never been a tomb with such an excessive attention to snake spells ever found. Nowhere else in Egypt did someone cover their walls with this much serpent magic. It's bizarre.
Even his sarcophagus, a gigantic stone block, is covered in inscriptions. Inside and out are liturgical texts from the 178th chapter of the Book of the Dead. The 178th chapter is specifically about the formula for preparing the corpse after death. Then on the sides of his coffin lid are excerpts from the 42nd chapter of the Book of the Dead. They are spells for warding off evil, and especially for warding off evil snakes.
The coffin is also covered with images of gods, mostly of the goddesses Eset and Nephthita. There are also a few other excerpts from the coffin texts and the pyramid texts, but mostly it's just more copies of what's written on the walls, all the stuff about snakes.
You're likely wondering what the point of all of these magic spells was. Researchers say the extent of magical text was meant to give Zehutiemhat's spirit a smooth transition into the afterlife. The spells were also likely designed to protect his tomb from robbers.
The anti-robber spells clearly didn't work because his tomb was indeed pillaged by robbers in the 5th century AD. And before you ask, the answer is no. No snake mummies were found in Mr. D's tomb, only the creepy spells.
Satan at the bottom of a toilet.
The most disturbing message imaginable was found in the worst place imaginable. It's so gross and bizarre I almost didn't want to tell you about it, but here we go, because now I'm sure you're dying to know.
A rolled-up piece of lead was discovered at the bottom of a toilet in Germany.
The lead artifact was a curse tablet from the 15th century where someone had tried to summon Satan. Summoning the devil is a very quick way to be burned at the stake for being a witch. Or at least it was 600 years ago.
Archaeologists believe the lead tablet invokes the name of Beelzebub, who was a stand-in for Satan in the Middle Ages. At first glance, it doesn't look that scary. It's just a normal piece of metal, like a piece of scrap tin folded in on itself. It was found at the bottom of a latrine at a construction site in Rostock in northern Germany.
When archaeologists unraveled the seemingly innocent scrap, they found a cryptic message. The message was written in Gothic minuscule, barely visible to the naked eye. I'm not sure how your Gothic is, but let me read the message to you.
Satanas taleke Belzebuk Hinrik berith. Did you get that, or should I follow up with the English translation? Basically, the text is asking Beelzebub and a demonic spirit named Berith to smite a woman named Teleke and a man named Hinrik. I don't know what these people did to the writer of the curse to make them angry, but they sure were mad. It wasn't enough to invoke the name of the devil. but a demonic spirit was thrown in there for good measure. The archaeologists who studied the tablet said someone may have broken up the author's relationship. He or she may have been spurned by love and jealousy, pushed to the absolute brink. The curse was to destroy their ex and their new lover.
Did you know that this kind of thing was surprisingly popular in ancient times? It was the equivalent of writing a nasty message on somebody's Insta post.
Archaeologist Georg Ansorge from the University of Greifswald in Germany said the Greeks and Romans used curse tablets as far back as 800 BC. Another similar tablet was recently found in Israel. It dates to 1500 years ago and is just as vicious as the one found at the bottom of the toilet. The author of the cursed tablet asked a pack of demons to harm a rival dancer, presumably to steal their position in the dance group. An even older tablet from 2,400 years ago was found in Greece. This one might be the nastiest. The author beseeched the gods of the underworld to target and destroy several tavern keepers.
It sounds like the author may have been barred from every tavern in town and was sour about it.
As for the cursed tablet being at the bottom of a 15th century toilet, it was put there on purpose.
People who were sneaky enough to create these tablets stashed them in places that no one would check. Nobody was going to be looking at the bottom of a toilet.
Message only visible at night.
Scientists have found ancient religious stones that are hiding a secret message you can only see at night. Who would have thought to check out an archaeological site under the cover of darkness to look for secret codes?
This is big news, and could change archaeology as we know it. If there are other messages at megalithic sites across the world, but they can only be seen at night, archaeologists might need to investigate them all over again. This newly found message is at an archaeological site so obscure it doesn't even have a name. It's located on Hendreburnick Down near Davidstow in England. It's between 4,000 and 6,000 years old, constructed at the tail end of the Stone Age.
Dr. Andy Jones with the Cornwall Archaeological Unit was investigating the site in the dark when he found 105 engravings on one of the stones. Although the engravings are visible in the sunlight, they become extra visible in the moonlight.
There is something about the pale lunar light that makes them shine. Dr. Jones said this site was likely used for night rituals. If the first image that comes to your mind is of hooded figures crowding around a fire at the core of a stone circle, you're not alone. That's exactly what I'm thinking too.
I hope you like creepy because it's going to get creepier before I'm done. Pagans in the British Isles associated darkness with two main things. One, the supernatural, and two, the heightening of the senses.
They believed nighttime was when supernatural fiends crept from their caves and their holes beneath tree trunks. They also believed it was the time when humans could best sense the presence of spirit. This mingling between the spirit world and the earthly domain culminated in religious rites being performed under the moon. Jones also found pieces of quartz stone all across the site smashed into pieces. It looks like somebody was blowing up rocks with TNT. Only that's not the case. The smashed quartz was part of the pagan ritual that was performed amidst the stones. When you smash two pieces of quartz together, they emit a brief glowing light. It's like a spark, only whiter. Ancient people may have gathered here, smashed quartz stones, and danced around in a frenzy. It would have been a dazzling display, especially under the full moon, and double especially with loud chanting and drumming. With the broken pieces of quartz all over the ground, the area would have been shining in the dark. The quartz shards would have been like reflections of the stars above, glittering in the grass around the standing stones.
As for the inscriptions, scientists haven't been able to make sense of them yet. There are strange cup and ring marks, but Dr. Jones doesn't know what they mean. Any guesses? And now for a quick break because it's shoutout time! I want to give a big thank you to Thomas Innigan and Eric Forsyth for supporting this channel. Thanks so much, guys! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already for more videos like these.
The 20,000-year mystery of the Ishango bone.
The Ishango bone is a mystery 20,000 years in the making. This unbelievable artifact was discovered in the wild jungles of the Congo in 1950. It's out of place, extremely controversial, and nobody can explain it.
Everyone has a stake in finding out the truth of this bone. It's important for mathematicians, historians are desperate to know its secrets, and archaeologists are practically foaming at the mouth when they start talking about it. The bone was initially discovered at the small fisherman's village of Ishango. It's curved, clearly old and worn, and smudged a dozen different shades of dirt. It's only 10 centimeters long, but it's not the size that counts here. It's what the bone means that gives it such power.
On the surface of the bone are engravings. There are markings meticulously arranged in columns. There is also a sharp piece of quartz fixed to one end, which may have been used for engraving. Some think the bone was used as a gigantic pen, and others think it was used for simple mathematical operations.
If this was a mathematical device, it's the oldest of its kind. The bone dates to the Upper Paleolithic, to a time when human civilization supposedly didn't exist. There were different cultures around the globe, but they had no written language that historians know about. They definitely weren't traveling around with abacuses and calculators.
Yet that's what researchers think the Ishango bone is, a prehistoric calculator. So, what's the truth? The truth is, you can't handle the truth. I'm just kidding, I just wanted to say that.
The truth of the bone is that it does contain different columns of notches and symbols and distinct patterns.
Somebody made these etchings on purpose, but there is no way to know why. Was somebody bored just marking the bone for no other reason than to give their hand something to do? Or was this the precursor to every language spoken on the planet today? Side note, nobody knows what animal the bone is from. It could be human, it could be alien, it could be from a pig. Your guess is as good as mine.
The naughty Lupanar graffiti.
In 79 AD, Mount Vesuvius erupted and the city of Pompeii was destroyed. Homes, wealthy estates, fast food joints, everywhere was destroyed, including Lupanar, one of the premier brothels of Pompeii that most people don't know about. If you're a little prudish, you might want to skip ahead.
Things are going to get moderately adult, but not quite R-rated. I'm here to tell you about the erotic paintings and crude messages that have been found scrawled across the walls of the brothel. I'm also going to give you some insider secrets about Pompeii that most archaeologists don't talk about.
For example, the city of Pompeii was closely associated with the goddess Venus. Many cities of the ancient world had a patron deity. Athens had Athena and Pompeii had Venus. She was the goddess of love, sex, and fertility. She was also the goddess most closely tied to prostitution.
Pompeii had a thriving sex work economy. The Lupanar stood at the intersection of two major streets, making it a popular social hub. Archaeologists have found sports tournaments advertised on its walls. They have found messages of political propaganda. This was a big hangout spot, with lots of foot traffic and people gathering outside the doors. In the 19th century, archaeologists were prudes. Historians wouldn't even examine or talk about the brothels in Pompeii because of their moral standing. Historians refused to investigate them at all. The Lupanar was avoided for years, and tourists weren't told anything about it. Archaeologists were so sheepish around anything sexual that when they found anything remotely erotic, like a nude painting, they classified the building as a brothel and abandoned it.
By the end of the 19th century, Pompeii had roughly 35 brothels. Seeing as it only had about 10,000 people before being buried in ash, that meant there was one brothel for every 286 citizens, or one brothel for every 71 adult men.
Those numbers are not exactly accurate.
Archaeologists have whittled down the number of actual brothels to only about 9, but still that's a lot. The Romans clearly didn't feel like keeping their lust in check.
In the 20th century, scholars began to take ancient brothels seriously. They studied erotic art to learn more about the history of these places, the people who worked in them, and the people who visited them. One of the most interesting areas of study has been the walls of the Lupanar. There are more than 150 examples of graffiti. I don't know how many of you have ever been in a truck stop toilet, but if you have, you'll know where I'm going with this.
There isn't much difference between what's scrawled on a bathroom stall now and what's graffitied on the walls of this ancient Roman building. People don't change that much, even in thousands of years.
You have your typical phallic drawings. There are death notices for some weird reason, a few poems, some crude etchings of things I'm not going to tell you about, scantily dressed men and women, men announcing their conquests, women with nicknames so shocking that you'll never hear them come out of my mouth. Of all the messages in all the ancient sites around the world, The graffiti at Pompeii's most famous brothel is disturbing on just about every level. The graffiti is juvenile, but the frescoes are fantastic works of art. There are beautiful erotic frescoes inside the brothel, lining the hallways and painted above doors. 7 are still in almost perfect condition, as if they were made just yesterday. But these are not frescoes that should be viewed by children. They illustrate men and women entangled in just about every adult position you can think of, and then some that you can't. I would like to mention one more thing about Pompeii and its brothels. Prostitution in Rome was a savage, inhuman, and despicable business. They were almost entirely slaves. At Pompeii, archaeologists found a skeleton of a woman still wearing a metal collar around her neck. If that doesn't give you the chills, I don't know what will. Was the Sphinx a god?
On a lighter note, everything you know about the mythical Sphinx is about to change. A mysterious message was found etched onto an ancient Sphinx sculpture about a century ago. Researchers have been stuck on it for the past 100 years. They couldn't figure out what the message said.
Now the mystery is over, or at least the first part of the mystery is over. The inscription has been deciphered, but now researchers must interpret what the message means. It's too shocking to comprehend. I should probably tell you that this particular Sphinx is not directly connected to the Great Sphinx in Egypt. This one is a small bronze statue that was discovered in Dacia. Dacia was a Roman province, corresponding to present-day Romania. The Sphinx is part lion, part eagle, with huge bronze wings. After its initial discovery in the 19th century, the statue was stolen from a wealthy count in 1848. Nobody knows what happened to it. The artifact has never been recovered, but there is a detailed drawing. The inscription is clearly readable in the drawing, and it's how scientists have been studying it for all these years. Peter Revets was the mastermind behind deciphering the artifact. He's a professor at the University of Nebraska, the kind of guy who can think outside the box. Peter finally deciphered the code when he realized it was written in the wrong direction. It goes right to left, not left to right. Here's what the inscription says. Lo, behold, worship. Here is the Holy Lion. That's it. It's not a very long inscription, but its implication is humongous. It seems to be proof that the Sphinx was worshipped and venerated as a god. According to Peter Revets, the Sphinx cult was not a mainstream Roman religion, but it was a real religion practiced throughout the Roman Empire. There was a whole subset of people who worshipped the Sphinx as a deity. According to Oxford Classical Dictionary, the first depictions of the Sphinx as a deity appeared in Egypt in the 3rd century BC. But what if the Sphinx was worshipped thousands of years earlier? Evidence is mounting that the Great Sphinx of the pyramids in Cairo is actually a depiction of an ancient god. Beware the Plague of Lice. You're not going to believe what the oldest sentence in the world says. You wouldn't guess even if I gave you the rest of the week. It's best if I just go ahead and tell you. Scholars have decoded the oldest sentence written using an alphabet. It's a warning about something that is still scaring people to this day. Who would have thought the oldest sentence in the world would be written on an ivory comb? This artifact, as seen here in this picture by Menahem Kahaha at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, was found at the site of Tel Lachish in 2016. That's in Israel, by the way. The ivory comb is 3,700 years old. The inscription on it is in the Canaanite language. Although there are older inscriptions, this is the oldest full sentence using what you and I consider a written alphabet. The comb says, translated into English of course, "May this tusk root out the lice of the hair and the beard." How do you like that? The oldest sentence in the world is a warning about lice. If you thought I was going to lay down some generational wisdom or an important message, you got it wrong. The comb's message is about the little bugs that get in your hair and your beard. People were just as scared of lice almost 4,000 years ago as they are today. Here's a fun fact for you to impress your friends with. When you write in English, like when you drop me a comment, you're really using Canaanite. The Canaanites developed the earliest alphabet in the world. Like I said, there were earlier forms of writing. You had cuneiform in Mesopotamia and hieroglyphics in Egypt 5,200 years ago. but the Canaanites developed the alphabet. Without it, we wouldn't have English. The difference between an alphabet and something like cuneiform is simplicity. An alphabet is a small number of letters that each corresponds to a basic spoken sound. Linguistics call them phonemes. The alphabet was a breakthrough in human history so large that reading and writing instantly became easier. It was an invention that changed the world in the same way as the internet. The chilling drought stones. Bad weather has been taken to the extreme in Europe. A message of imminent doom was revealed when a river started running out of water in the Czech Republic. I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but we might be in trouble here. The incredibly warm weather caused the River Elbe to shrink. When the water dropped to a certain level, something known as a hunger stone or a drought stone was revealed on the river's banks. The hunger stone has an ominous message that was carved into it during a previous drought hundreds of years ago. Those who carved the message did so to warn people in the future that if they were to lay eyes on it, they had better pack up their things and run away. Food security in the Middle Ages was practically non-existent. If there was the slightest hiccup with the harvest, hunger and famine could become widespread. One bad harvest due to a year of drought was cataclysmic. When locals saw the water level in the river plummet and the drought stone emerge, they knew their bellies would start rumbling soon. Droughts happen pretty frequently. Researchers have established that Europe experienced major droughts throughout the last several centuries. One of the last big droughts was at the beginning of the 19th century. It resulted in what are known as the Hungry Years of 1816 and 1817. The next big drought was in 1918 during World War I. The hunger stone in the River Elbe has other dates written on it with lines to presumably indicate how far down the water fell. The dates are 1616, 1746, 1790, 1800, 1842, and 1868. The earliest date, so old and smudged it's hardly legible, is 1417. This rock has been a warning of doom for more than 600 years. The message written on it is a simple one. The stone says, "When you see me, cry. Send wine now." A shard of pottery was on display at the Israel Museum in Jerusalem for about 50 years before archaeologists realized there's a secret message on it. The message is a little more light-hearted than the one on the European hunger stone. It's a demand for more wine. Researchers with Tel Aviv University discovered the message on the back of the pottery shard using sophisticated new imaging techniques. The message has always been there, but it was so faded that no one could read it. Modern technology fixed that in a hurry. The shard was found years ago in 1965. It was recovered from a mighty desert fortress in Israel near the Dead Sea called Arad. The piece of pottery is significantly old, dating to roughly 600 BC. It's a miracle that Arad's stone walls are still standing. Archaeologists have been able to trace its history to the period of the Book of Judges, circa 1200 BC. It remained an important defensive structure all the way until the destruction of the First Temple in 580 BC. That was when Israel was crushed by the Babylonians. Arad also happens to be the only Israelite fortress found to contain a temple to Yahweh. As an obviously important stronghold, it makes sense that Arad housed a strong contingent of soldiers. According to the recently deciphered message, the soldiers could get very thirsty. The newly deciphered message was addressed to the man in charge of the compound. The very first line of the message reads, "If there is any wine, send it." The rest of the message is a demand for military supplies, but they started with what was obviously the most important to them. The soldiers needed more wine. An ancient message found on Easter Island. A secret message on an ancient wooden tablet is undecipherable. The wooden tablet was taken from Easter Island to Rome, where scientists recently dated it for the first time. It's old, it's amazing, and it has scientists at a loss. The wooden tablet contains a lost language that nobody can speak anymore. It's more than 500 years old, predating the arrival of Europeans to Easter Island. The script is called Rongo Rongo. It's one of the last unreadable languages in the world. I've talked about this before on the channel, but this is big news, so I want to bring it up again. Researchers have officially dated the wooden tablet to between 1493 and 1509. That means Rongo Rongo was written 200 years before Europeans showed up. Why is this such a big deal? Because the text could be one of the very few examples of an independently created writing system. Just like how the Canaanites independently invented the alphabet, the people of Easter Island may have developed their own unique writing system. For any civilization, that's a major milestone. If only the experts could read it. The Rongo Rongo script is preserved on less than 30 wooden objects. Scientists can't read a single word of it. What I find most fascinating is how different the Rongo Rongo glyphs are from European texts, or any text for that matter. The glyphs don't look like Egyptian hieroglyphs. They don't look like cuneiform, they don't look like Chinese characters, they definitely don't look like Latin letters. It's a totally unique form of writing created by a culture whose traditions have been almost all lost. Things took a turn for the worse when Easter Island was taken over by Catholic missionaries in the 19th century. This particular tablet was stolen by those very missionaries in 1869 and sent to Europe. It's a miracle it's still around today. The weird history of mail. Do you ever stop to appreciate just how amazing the Postal Service is? If you have, this listing is right up your alley. Did you know the United States Postal Service can be traced all the way back to ancient Persia? The earliest postal services ever used were in places like Egypt and China. The Assyrians and Babylonians also used mail delivery. But it was the Persian Empire in the 6th century BC that took the idea of mail and ran with it. Let's teleport to the year 550 BC to the creation of the Achaemenid Empire. They began to build an extensive network of roads so that horsemen could travel great distances to deliver messages. The roads weren't to help merchants, they weren't to move armies, they were to deliver mail. According to estimates from modern scholars, the Persians could deliver a message from Susa in western Iran all the way to Sardis in western Turkey in only 7 days. The mailman followed a highway known as the Royal Road, which connected the two cities over a distance of 1,600 miles. That's only the tip of the iceberg. At its peak, under the rule of Darius the Great, the Persian Empire dominated the known world. They controlled territory from India to Greece. Exchanging information was hugely important to keep the empire functioning. Archaeologists have records of messages being delivered from India to Egypt. Dr. Pierre Bryant, who wrote a book on the history of the Persian Empire, said that never before had messages been delivered on such a massive scale. The Persians were so good at delivering mail on horseback that their postal system inspired the creation of cavalry units amongst the Greeks. It resulted in the creation of the game Polo. There was one other thing the Persian postal system did, and that was standardize language across a vast area. Because Aramaic was the administrative language of the empire, it was used as the gold standard of messages. Everything was delivered in Aramaic. It was sort of like how today the Latin alphabet is the gold standard for parcels and envelopes around the globe. You can still see the remnants of the ancient postal service scattered across Iran. The original post offices survive today as ruins in the desert known as Chapar Khanez. After the fall of the Persian Empire in the 7th century AD, their postal service fell into disuse. The post offices became rest stops between major cities, like mini fortresses where travelers could spend the night. So, the next time you get your Amazon package, be sure to give a quick thank you to the Persian Empire.
Thanks for watching! Be sure to stay tuned for extra content you might have missed. The Curse of the Mummy. When archaeologists recently unearthed 168 sarcophagi from an Egyptian necropolis, they discovered something shocking. Some tombs that had been holding the sarcophagi were found to contain curses. Mummy curses that were inscribed into the walls of these dark underground burial chambers. And these curses were not very friendly. These discoveries were made in Saqqara. It's an ancient city of the dead, a monumental burial ground where hundreds upon hundreds of mummies have been found buried in boxes, both above and below the sand. The over 160 coffins were only recently uncovered over a 3-month period, and this is after decades of research. Egyptologist Salima Ikram said that the curses found inscribed in the tombs are mostly there to deter trespassers. a warning to people who wanted to desecrate the mummies and steal their stuff. One of these curses was found in the tomb of the royal vizier Ankh-Mahor, who was a counselor to a pharaoh 4,000 years ago. The curse states that if any damage is done to his tomb, the same damage will be done to the culprit's property. It also warns that the vizier has secret knowledge of magic and spells, which will curse the trespasser with the fear of seeing ghosts. And there are other curses too, like ones that threaten any who trespass will have their neck wrung like a goose. The Lady of Elmiron. Inside a tomb over 18,000 years old, archaeologists have discovered a hidden message. It was found at a gravesite in northern Spain, where a mysterious woman called the Red Lady of Elmiron was buried around 18,700 years ago. The woman's remains were originally discovered next to a block colored in red ochre pigment. She was buried with flowers, alongside thousands of stone artifacts and scattered animal bones. It's an important burial site because it's the very first one ever found from the Magdalenian Age on the Iberian Peninsula. The Magdalenian Age covers from 19,000 to 11,000 years ago. The woman died between the age of 35 and 40, and now recent excavations have discovered what archaeologists think is her tombstone. It's a large limestone block that features a triangular engraving, which has led to the most recent mystery. Archaeologists say it's meant to represent the female pubic bone. It's a hidden message that scientists don't fully understand. We know this was a very important woman in her community, perhaps the leader, but why a pelvic bone was left carved into her tombstone is anyone's guess. It could have been some kind of symbol of female power, but researchers are kind of confused. Tomb of the Prophet. In Iraq, archaeologists were recently documenting a series of ancient tombs from the Kingdom of Nineveh. While they were looking around, they discovered that a tunnel had been dug underneath a tomb that supposedly belonged to the biblical prophet Jonah. When archaeologists dug deeper into the tunnel, they found writings on the walls, including inscriptions written in the ancient Neo-Assyrian language. One of these messages is quite fascinating. Researchers have translated it to read, "The palace of Esarhaddon, strong king, king of the world, king of Assyria, governor of Babylon, king of Sumer and Akkad, king of the kings of Lower Egypt, Upper Egypt, and Kush." Clearly, this guy had quite a lot of titles. If what's written on the wall is to be believed, the Assyrian king Esarhaddon was the king of pretty much everyone. One of the most remarkable things is that he was allegedly the king of Kush, a mysterious ancient kingdom located south of Egypt in Nubia, which back then would have been a world away from the region of Mesopotamia. Other inscriptions were found here basically describing the king surrounding, conquering, plundering, demolishing, destroying, and burning all the cities which stood against him. However, it's unclear what the king has to do with the biblical prophet Jonah. The inscriptions were found underneath Jonah's tomb in a tunnel, which had been blown apart by ISIS in 2014. Jonah is in the Quran as a preacher in the city of Nineveh and was supposedly swallowed by a giant whale. Helicopter hieroglyphs. In the Temple of Seti I, Markaz al-Belina, Egypt, there is a strange set of hieroglyphics inscribed on the wall. It's an ancient Egyptian frieze that appears to show proof of highly advanced technology and perhaps even contact with beings from another world. A frieze is an area of sculpted or painted decoration, usually on a wall. These inscriptions are considered by some to be out of place and to be evidence of otherworldly business in ancient Egypt. And yet to some, they are just ordinary hieroglyphics that have been wildly misinterpreted. Here's what makes the inscription so unique. The engravings show what appears to be a helicopter, a submarine, and several airplanes. Of course, these modern pieces of machinery aren't perfect interpretations. They look like a child's messy drawings of helicopters and submarines. Still, the resemblance is uncanny. It's made some believe that the Egyptians were visited by time travelers who, for some bizarre reason, brought helicopters and submarines with them, or had been given a glimpse into the future by some unknown magic. Mainstream archaeologists say the carvings are nothing unusual at all. Instead, people are just seeing patterns that aren't there. The real explanation for the helicopter has been solved thanks to digital imaging. Researchers have looked at the hieroglyphics and found that the helicopter is actually two completely separate pictures that were carved at different times. The original carving was made during the reign of the pharaoh Seti I. It read, "He who repulses the 9 enemies of Egypt." The inscription was remade under the reign of Ramses II to say, "He who protects Egypt and overthrows foreign countries." The Tomb of Nestors Cup. Inside an ancient Greek tomb from 2,800 years ago, archaeologists found an intriguing artifact called Nestor's Cup. The cup is fascinating because of an inscription on the clay vessel. According to researchers from Brown University, the text on the cup says roughly, "I am Nestor's cup, good to drink from. Whoever drinks this cup empty will be seized by desire for the beautifully crowned goddess Aphrodite." This inscription is supposed to be a jest, a comical reference to the legendary King Nestor, who was a character in Homer's famous epic poems The Iliad and the Odyssey. In the story, Nestor drinks from a giant golden chalice with the magical power to restore his strength. Of course, this cup probably held no kind of magical concoction, but it's still an important artifact because its inscription is one of the oldest known examples of the Greek alphabet being written in the Euboean alphabet. But who exactly was buried in this tomb? It's been a mystery because researchers first thought that it was a child buried with this strange artifact, but a more recent analysis showed that what researchers thought were children's bones were actually the bones of 3 human adults. What the cup and its inscription have to do with these people is still unknown. What do you think the cup and its inscriptions could mean? Let me know in the comments below. The Nazareth Inscription. The Nazareth Inscription was supposedly the Roman response to finding Jesus' tomb empty after the resurrection 2,000 years ago. It's also called the Nazareth Decree, and it's a huge marble slab carved with an edict that was issued by the Roman Emperor Caesar. The declaration on the slab is a warning that anyone caught robbing a grave will be given severe punishment. That's pretty much all it says. It's a warning to potential grave robbers. Nobody actually knows where this slab came from. Its first documented sighting was when it came to Paris in 1878, sold by a German collector named Wilhelm Frohner. He didn't leave any notes on where he'd originally acquired it, so its origins are still a mystery. The translation was done in 1930, and it's been dated to sometime between the year 100 BC and 100 AD, the time when Jesus supposedly lived and died. Since nobody can say for sure, one of the dominant theories is that the Roman authorities carved this marble warning and put it in front of Jesus' tomb. This was after they heard his disciples predicting his body would arise with his divine resurrection. This could very well be evidence that Jesus died, was entombed, and then his body miraculously vanished. The Bloody Curse. Another terrifying curse was discovered in a tomb, this time in Israel. The curse, as if an ordinary curse wasn't scary enough, was painted in what looks like blood. It was left on a small rock tablet and buried in a tomb at the Beit Shearim necropolis in Lower Galilee. According to researchers at the University of Haifa and the Israel Antiquities Authority, this particular catacomb was unknown until 2021. Archaeologists broke through the surface and began digging around, and that was when they found the curse. It was the first of its kind to be found in this huge necropolis for 65 years. This was a Jewish settlement between the 2nd and 5th centuries AD, populated after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. It was one of the major centers for Jewish learning and culture after they almost went extinct at the hands of the Romans. The inscription was written in Greek and not in blood, but in red paint. It has 8 lines of warning, but the message is pretty clear. It says Jacob the proselyte vows to curse anybody who would open this grave, so nobody will open it. Not that spooky, but still fascinating, especially because of the word proselyte. This was a title given to those who converted to Judaism from either Christianity or one of the major pagan cults of the day, such as the cult of Isis or the cult of Mithras. Early ABCs. Thomas Schneider from the University of British Columbia recently studied a 3,400-year-old inscription found inside an Egyptian tomb. He discovered that this primitive chunk of limestone could very well be the earliest example of an alphabetical sequence. 3 of the words start with the letters B, C, and D, and the rest of the tablet is broken and indecipherable. Each of the words is accompanied by a symbol in front of the letters, since that was how early Egyptian hieroglyphic writing worked. But it's amazing because when everything is put together, it reads like a mnemonic device. For example, A is for apple, B is for banana, C is for cantaloupe, you get it. Researchers believe this may have been used by early Egyptians as a kind of learning tool to help them with learning their own alphabet. The message on Howard Carter's grave. Possibly no curse in history has been more terrifying than the one discovered in Tutankhamun's tomb when it was found in 1922. Howard Carter was the one who discovered the resting place of the boy king from the 19th dynasty, who ruled over the New Kingdom and was the very last of his royal family to hold power. Howard Carter broke open the seal to the boy's tomb after it was found in the Valley of the Kings. The curse was allegedly unleashed on all of those who were involved, and quite a few of the main players in that excavation did indeed have miserable lives afterward. But we're not here today to talk about this particular curse. Rather, this is about an inscription that can be found today on Howard Carter's own grave. When Howard started rooting through the tomb, he found a lot of good stuff. Hundreds of artifacts, gold figurines, an absolute wealth of treasure. But Carter's very favorite artifact was a mysterious cup with an inscription written on it. It's now known as the Lotus Chalice, and it's one of the most valuable artifacts from ancient Egypt. It took some time after the discovery, but the writing on the chalice was finally translated. Howard Carter loved the message so much that he made sure that when he died, the entire thing was transcribed on his tombstone. It says, "May your spirit live, may you spend millions of years, you who love Thebes, sitting with your face to the north wind, your eyes beholding happiness." The mysterious tomb of Roxana. At an ancient Greek tomb in northern Macedonia, researchers discovered paintings on a group of columns. According to the culture minister Kostas Tassoulas, the columns of the ancient tomb of Amphipolis were cleaned to reveal paintings. These paintings may just help solve the mystery of who is buried here. This is one of the biggest tombs in all of ancient Greece, built back in the days of Alexander the Great, but we don't know who it was for. And just before the mysterious paintings were found inside, a skeleton was unearthed beneath. It wasn't a simple thing to find either. Researchers had to dig through the floor, past giant statues of sphinxes, then break through a solid wall into a hidden antechamber. The chamber was decorated with beautiful mosaics, and there in the dark was a body. This body had been lying undisturbed in total darkness for about 2,300 years. This probably wasn't Alexander's tomb, something that still has never been found. But there is a very good chance that the person found buried underneath this place was Roxana, Alexander's Persian wife. She was one of the most important women in Greek history, Alexander's trusted partner as he conquered the known world until he died at the young age of 32. And while there weren't any hidden messages or inscriptions for clues, researchers think the paintings could help with the identity of the body. In the mysterious paintings found above the tomb, there is a woman shown who seems to be of great importance. This woman in the paintings could very well be Roxana. Thanks for watching! Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you soon for more amazing videos. Bye!